Firm, we got a heavy hitter today.
I'm always on the show.
Good one. Oh, look, we both got fresh haircuts for the show for Steve. Loving the lineup, Nikki Sharp says. Let me tell you this. Before we got on, I was talking to Cody about our guest, Steve Haydock, and I said, look, there's not many level 4s above me, but if there were one, it would be this guy. There's levels to this thing, right, Fern?
I agree that Steve is a fantastic level 4. So I'm not really sure where I want to go with that. I will say this: some of the funniest stories I've ever had in my CrossFit career involve Steve Haydock. Most of them involve interns.
I got one of those too. Yeah, I mean, we could have a whole show on that. Steve, can I mention the one from Chicago or not even bring it up?
No, let's not start like that. Maybe we'll save that for if I get us back again, we can talk about that.
Okay.
Well, let's do this. We're obviously we're going to do intro to level 2. I don't know that there's a lot of people out there that do not know who you are, Steve, but give the listeners here a quick bio of your CrossFit history / resume, whatever we want to call that. I'm not even sure what we want to do.
CV, little couple CV.
Okay. You said this is kind of like an interview, so I suppose we'll see what happens. Yeah, I found CrossFit 2007. That was on the back of getting my black belt in jiu-jitsu, which was humble brag. That was a very rough physical experience.
Toughest, full disclosure, Steve Haydock, the hardest person I've ever rolled jiu-jitsu with. No joke. I've rolled with many, many black belts. There's levels to this. Just like there is to level 4. Steve made me cry.
The professor.
You made me cry.
Yeah. Well, I've just been doing it a long time.
Yeah.
That's it. So I got involved, found CrossFit 2007 just by doing a little internet search and did the workout, loved it. I believe it was the first level 1 that was ever held outside of the US, I believe.
Oh,
and that was in Manchester, UK. And I was super lucky that Coach Glassman gave most of the lectures. Nicole Carroll was there. Todd Widman was there. I think Andy Stump was there as well at that point. So it was super OG crew. It was a huge level 1. I think we had 90 plus participants on this seminar.
Wow.
And it was, we did like
say 90, 90?
90, yeah, 90,
wow.
yeah. We had 3 workouts on day 1, 3 workouts on day 2. It was like all the old station rotation where like GHD, rowing, muscle up, all that kind of crazy stuff. It was an experience. So I found that, and then soon after opened an affiliate, which was a jiu-jitsu CrossFit hybrid, right from the beginning for me. It was just a very natural plug-in of like, hey, this makes you like super fit, and now you've got a very practical application for your fitness by doing this combat sport. So and then having like done that for a couple of years, I was then fortunate enough to get on the final, I believe it was the final level 2, which is now the level 4, which they offered it was in Switzerland. And having been successful in that assessment, I then got asked to intern and came on staff 2010. Been doing it ever since. So I'm probably at like 450 seminars, something like that now, I would say, up in that kind of range of weekends on the road, level 1s, level 2s. And that's my background.
Fern, we're only bringing heavy hitters on for this level 2 manual. I mean, that's it. I mean, Steve's setting the bar high. We got Pat Barber, Jen Hunter Marshall, Teffy. We got the best of the best coming on for this level 2 manual. And Steve,
all flow masters basically. So we're trying to figure out why you're here.
I'm gonna take off. Actually, you're actually right. It might be only flow masters. Joe DeGane. Yeah, you're right.
On that, hold on real quick. So Steve, you'll appreciate this. So Steve has choked me out, I think, just one time at a seminar during lunch when he was just like, he was just showing me I wouldn't even call what we were doing jiu-jitsu. He was just like, hey, I want to introduce you to something, and basically expose the fact that I have no ability to defend myself whatsoever.
You should. I would really love you to take up jiu-jitsu for him.
But I am going to take up jujitsu. But I want to tell Steve, my daughter started jujitsu, and I can definitely see the value of it. But she's not good.
That's okay. Neither am I.
It's okay.
It's pretty painful to watch right now. But I can see that it will be worth it over time. But I have a lot of anxiety as a parent at these jujitsu.
I would argue not being good. What's up, Mike? Thank you for coming back. Cody hasn't eaten.
Oh, $10 coming in with the
in
heat,
2
Mike.
weeks. Yeah. I forgot to tell you, I haven't spoken to Fern since yesterday's coach's development call. Mike took the level 2 this past weekend. And what I told him, I tell everybody every weekend, the Affiliate U coach's development, points of performance, progressions, all that, like you're light years above everybody else. And Mike said he was. I said, because don't come back if you get bad feedback.
Yeah.
Don't come back.
We're gonna demand more money if you get bad feedback, Mike.
Yeah, definitely everyone should be doing jiu-jitsu. But what I was going to say is, I think part of who I am, and I'm saying this in all seriousness, was when I was a young kid, getting my ass kicked on the wrestling, like every single day, you just develop a tolerance, you develop an ability to like push through shit that's like I didn't even think of it. Like when I was getting my ass kicked in middle school and up through my freshman year, I was just like, well, this is my life. Like I go and get my ass kicked for 3 hours. Like that's what I do. Like my mom never was like, how are you doing? Right. I was like, oh.
All right, a little advice. I'm going to ask for some advice here, Steve. So they paired up with a little boy who was a little bit bigger than her, obviously been doing a little bit longer. And she was like trying, I forget what they were doing, but like it was a struggle bus for her. And the little boy's dad, he was like, is that your daughter in the pink? And I said, yeah. He's like, I'll tell him to ease up and let her do it if you want me to. And I was like, no. I was like, don't. I was like, she needs to struggle. Do not tell him to do anything. I'm okay if she's frustrated. It's fine. And then I was like, I don't know. Is that good parent? I don't know if that's good or not, actually. I was like, I know that's what my dad would do. Okay.
I mean,
all right, cool.
Steve brushed, he mentioned it, but he owns Kokoro is the name of both your affiliate and jiu-jitsu academy, right?
Yeah.
His wife, Natasha, also now a flow master.
Yep.
Great friend of both of ours, but she got her purple belt under Steve recently. So shout out to Natasha.
That's legit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I kind of want to roll with her and I kind of don't want to be embarrassed.
I don't.
After. So I'm like, if we see her at the summit, I'm going to be like, Natasha, I'm injured. I can't roll. I can't roll right now.
Okay. So, all right. We've waited for enough time here.
Let's get to that one question, Cody.
Well, that's where we're going to go. We're going to come back to it. So here's what's going to happen. So obviously we're doing the intro to the level 2. Steve, I've worked a handful of level 2s with you as well.
Favorite flow master. My favorite flow master. When I see Steve Haydock on the trainer email, I'm like, fuck yeah.
Steve and Joe DeGane. I know Steve and I are going to have some tinfoil hat sessions typically on the trainer dinner. But why? Let's just start with this. Why should somebody take their level 2? You've taught many level 2s. You've seen many trainers come through the pipeline. Anybody who's just like, I'm just going to retake my level 1, why should they take their level 2?
Because realistically, if you want to be a world-class coach, if you want to be a better coach, you got to take the next step. And like one of the worst things you can do is just sit in that stagnation of being like, I know it. Like I'm good here. I've got the bare minimum. And any world-class coach that I've worked with, and honestly, one of the best things that we've had being exposed to the team that we get to work with is that concept of like, we're never a finished product. So, part of our responsibility for ourselves with our development, but then also providing a better service to our clients, members, athletes, the CrossFit community itself, is to strive to be better at what we're doing. And one of the simplest ways you can do that is just by continuing your education, whether that be within CrossFit or outside of CrossFit. It shouldn't be like, hey, I'm good. If I run into people like that working seminars, I have a pretty good indication of how much they really care about coaching. It's a very telling decision to be like, I don't need more than the bare minimum.
Right. Cut that, Cody, because we're going to use that because we couldn't have said it better. Cody dropped in the comments, but those of you that are here watching, drop your credential, level 1, level 2, 3, 4. We'd love to see what you're at. And Fern and I have reiterated much of what Steve has said. Just you can tell how much you care by your credential. Like, and that's not, if you've worked on level 3 and not passed yet, that's, you're trying for it. And I think that's really important and well said. The question that came up earlier, Cody, I think we can kind of kick off with this, but you go to your level 1. We typically say you got to get some coaching under your belt. A good rule of thumb, minimum 6 months, but it's really you coaching 2 hours a week or 10 hours a week. We want to see some coaching. And I would tell you this, the studying aspect for the level 2 is coaching, right? I mean, there's a test at the end. It's take home. You could take it. It's kind of like the judging course. Like you're going to take it online. What happens at the level 2 has no indication on whether you pass or fail the test, but you're going to get feedback and practicing your coaching. But like I told Mike, you're going to coach the 9 foundational movements. So know them inside and out. Know the points of performance. Know progressions if they have one. If there isn't a progression, how are you going to teach people? Just know that. And you don't even have to do it for all 9. I mean, show up with 2 or 3 and you're way ahead of everyone. I mean, that's where I would start. Mapuzzi, is it? Oh, wait. Is that, I don't know who Mapuzzi is. Is that right, Cody? I feel like
that's what the name says, so I don't know.
I feel like I'm saying something dirty. I don't know if that's anyway.
Just if you read it real fast, Jay, you'll get it.
I started to do that as I was saying it. So anyway, Mapuzzi.
Stop that. Why are you doing that? Stop that.
Anyway, you got me, Mapuzzi.
You have to be better than that.
All right. So Steve, so somebody who's getting ready to go to level 2, what's your recommendations just for preparation, obviously?
Go back through your level 1 content, know your points of performance, know your teaching progressions, and I would say this, whether you're going to go to a level 2 or not, like the level 1 is such a dump of information. You get so much information. And I think one of the biggest tragedies for coaches, even if they're not showing up to their level 2, is they don't go back and revisit that information post level 1. Like, and you've made the distinction between credentials here of like, okay, well, we have level 1, 2, 3, 4. Like, just because I hold a level 4 doesn't mean I'm not constantly going back to the level 1 content, which is the heart and soul of CrossFit. And every time you go back to it and you revisit and you reread and you find other layers of understanding, or you find more, effective ways to communicate points of performance, right? That is the most important thing. And it's called the level 1 kernel for a reason, because everything else builds off of that. So I think, at each level, 1, 2, 3, 4, there is huge value in going back to the level 1. And as you gain experience through coaching, working in affiliate, whatever, you're going to rediscover or freshly discover new content, new understandings that you just wouldn't have picked up in the first place. And that is my advice for the level 2 prep is go back and know the level 1. You'd be amazed how many people show up on a level 2 and you'd ask them a simple question like, hey, what's the definition of CrossFit? And they can't tell you. Or what's the definition of fitness? And they can't tell you. But this is the message. This is the product that we're meant to be providing in our affiliates. And we have coaches that can't articulate that, which is the first thing you learn on the level 1. So never stray too far from that content. And the more you know it, the better you understand it, the better you're going to perform level 2, 3, and then eventually 4.
I mean, obviously, Steve, you've been teaching this content, but I continue to find this to be the case, is like virtually every, obviously nothing is perfect, right? I'm not saying CrossFit is perfect. I'm not saying the methodology is perfect. The organization is perfect, but I'm just like the content inside of the level 1, when people argue against it, what I find most often is they just literally have no concept of the actual content inside of the course. Like they clearly have never read it. They've never taken it. And their arguments literally don't make sense, because I'm like, that's not at all what we teach.
Yeah, and it's there's part of that that's ignorance in people who haven't shown up and taken it. They're being the critic from the outside without understanding, which is an argument of zero foundation, in my opinion, trying to argue against something you haven't tried to understand. And then I think the other side of that is that people that come in, and because of the amount of information and the depth of information, they only pick up a surface level understanding in their first exposure. And then without revisiting that, they allow, criticisms to form in their mind because they don't really understand the methodology. Or the other problem that I see a lot is that they've been exposed to an affiliate experience as their norm, which doesn't really express the methodology as it should be expressed. So then they're coming at it from this very strange point of like, well, I've been doing CrossFit for 5 years and it doesn't look like what you're talking about. Right. So there isn't sometimes a disconnect there of, they're used to their experience. One of the prime examples of that is when we have discussions around heavy days and the whole strength metcon, program norm in a lot of affiliates. And they're like, what do you mean you just come in and you're going to back squat for an hour? It's so alien that they don't understand it. So then they criticize it. It's like, this isn't how we do it. So it's, there's different layers of understanding. For me, the level 1 is a seminal piece of work. I would say not only in the fitness industry, but in, of our time in terms of what it tries to communicate for health and wellness.
I would go even further than that, Steve. I would be like, I have yet to go back into there and not take some of those concepts or those theories and be able to repurpose them in other areas of my life that have nothing to do with health and fitness, by the way.
Yeah.
Like most of the things that I've recreated as far as like affiliate U models and things like are recreated from that concept because it just carries over so seamlessly. And I'm like, oh, I know exactly what that means. I'm just going to use it over here. Like that's just so profound.
Yeah, and the interesting thing, Fern, is the concepts and the framework that we're going to talk about in terms of the foundations of effective coaching and training. Those 6 criteria, which are just like a phenomenal resource to identify weaknesses and strengths, and then develop coaches. You could equally apply in industry, in the service industry, in the banking industry. Like that kind of stuff is so foundational. And I think, I've had many conversations with people that we've worked with of like, if you took this stuff and applied it in a Fortune 500 company, you could make the company better, like undoubtedly, and that I think is the value of the level 2 beyond coaching, is that you get this blueprint to look at the world in a sense, in a different way, and work out where you're good and bad. And you could take it and apply it to your relationship with your wife of like, hey, do you know what, I talk too much, I overtalk things, and I don't see I don't see really obvious things, and when I see really obvious things, I don't do anything about it. I just ignore the problem. It's like it's seeing and correcting at a relationship level. It's a fantastic template.
So that's obviously a good segue there. So let's dive into, the first lecture in level 2, Foundations of Effective Training, where we kind of outline the 6 criteria, right? So teaching, seeing, and teaching, seeing, correcting, group management, presence and attitude, and demonstration. There's a handful of lectures that I enjoy watching you give specifically, Steve. This is one of them. The other one is the technique lecture in the level 1. I just enjoy the theatrics of that lecture that you give.
Yeah.
But I think this is a lecture that you're also extremely gifted at presenting. So outside of going into the lecture, kind of talk a little bit about the importance of this piece of the level 2 specifically. It's obviously, it's where we start the weekend, but kind of give people a little bit of exposure to like what it is that we're trying to convey with regard to this lecture specifically.
Sure. So, the lecture, once kind of the meet and greet happens at the beginning, this lecture sets the framework for the whole weekend. So every practical drill pretty much is going to draw from content that is delivered in this lecture. And, we constantly refer back to it. We use it to prep drills of like people going into the drill of like, hey, remember this, this, and this. But equally, we'll also use the content to then debrief drills as well. So for me, the value of it is it just provides this template of like, hey, you want to be better at something? Hey, look at this template, assess, what you need to work on. And then once you've done it, come back to the template, see where you were good and bad, provide your next action plan for how you get better from this. So, I remember back on the old level 2, there was a version of this lecture that was presented right at the beginning. It was a kind of 20-minute brief of like, hey, you got to be good at this, 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 and this. And here we go. Let's go to a practical. And now you suck at this. You suck at this. You suck at this. You're terrible. Go cry in the corner for a little bit and come back and try again. That's basically
that is actually not far off from what actually it looks like in practical application.
Yeah, that's basically what it was. And and because of that and the disconnect there, that's how we ended up with our credentialing structure of like infilling now to help people develop. But ultimately, that template of the 6 criteria will apply throughout. And the other thing that I love about it is it's very clearly referenced also in the level 1, right? So that is an important distinction to make, that the criteria, even though we really unpack it in the level 2, you are going to hear about it in the level 1, especially in regards to the day 2 workout brief, because we're going to start talking about this stuff.
You had a big influence on that change, the wicker, because I remember you basically doing that before it was part of the course.
Wow.
No, I mean, I'm not going to say
I vividly remember Steve giving the day 2 workout. We kind of brief it, we do a little demo of it, and then like a year later, it was like, oh, by the way, this is how we do it now. And I was like, oh,
yeah,
well.
So here's the thing. I've never been afraid to, I'm always within the lines. Don't get me wrong, but I'm always prepared to. I'm prepared to. Like I'm always looking for ways that we can do things better, and I'm never satisfied with like, hey, this is the way. I'd be a terrible Mandalorian.
One of my favorite things you've done is when you make day 1 a partner workout. That is my ultimate favorite. It's just fun. It's just a good time. Yes, I'm highly distracted. Our chat is off the rails. Trish is talking about really dirty shit in our chat. And I don't mind it. I love it. But I'm like, you cannot get me to pay attention to Steve right now. You're talking about, really crazy stuff. Anyway. And thank you, Trish, for the donation. I did see that come through. So in regards to the 6 criteria, Steve, which do you think is the most important?
They're all important. They're equally important.
Good answer. That is in fact the right answer. That is in fact the right answer.
Yeah,
I'm pretty sure the answer is presence and attitude, but we'll go with that for today.
I can see how you would say that, Jason.
There you go. Steve's no dummy.
You can't see him correct, so you got to rely on the presence and attitude.
I just got to keep it fun.
Distract them with your one-liners. Yeah,
exactly. Okay, let me rephrase it. Newer coaches coming into the level 2 or experience, where do you see the most opportunity to improve?
I would say if you're a newer coach, put your focus into teaching as a first step, right? So hopefully if you're a newer coach, you're in an affiliate, hopefully they've got some procedures, they've got some policies. So things like the group management piece, like having a plan, all that kind of stuff should kind of be in play. And I think the novice's curse is often the teaching piece of not being able to explain things clearly, not knowing the points of performance well enough, overcomplicating things, not having clear progression steps, that kind of stuff. And what I found in my time doing this is the better you develop your teaching skills, the fewer problems you're going to run into down the line. So, there'll be a lot of people like, oh, well, I'm going to watch a ton of video and really develop my ability to see movement, which is a super important skill. I just wouldn't put that as my first step. I would put my teaching as like, hey, I want to teach this thing really well. So I'm actually minimizing the problems that I then have to see and correct. And then that just is a logical sequence for me of like, okay, we have to come in and we have to teach the movement every class. So let's get really good at it. And then when we're exposed to watching movement over time, that the skill of seeing will develop, along with the efficiency of correcting. So I think teaching, a lot of people take it for granted. They don't, I think there's an art to teaching something well, of like being able to take something very complex, go step by step, like layer by layer, and really making sure people understand something without having to overtalk. Minimum communication for maximum result in terms of the movement, like having people move.
Yeah, I find that to be I remember it was for me as well, but this is probably across the board. The simplification of the content to only what is necessary tends to be one of the biggest challenges for new coaches. It's just like, blah, I'm just going to say everything I know. And I'm like, only give them one thing.
Yeah.
And they're like, oh, this is way easier. And I'm like, I know.
And I think sometimes, Fern, a lot of that, when you do have a newer coach, especially, you know, you'll get coaches in CrossFit, all ages, all backgrounds. And one of the hardest things is putting yourself in the front of a room, in front of a group of people who you've probably been working out with. They're probably your peers. And now you've gone and taken this course and you're brought back into this environment with this expectation of like, I've now got to coach these people. I've got to lead these people through something. And I think the trap there is by trying to make something seem more complex than it really needs to be, you're creating this like, oh, this person knows what they're doing. But ultimately, I think a lot of the time that backfires. You know, there's something for someone who can come in and be like, hey, we're going to do this, this, and this. Here we go. Like super simple. We get things going and people are moving and understanding at the most simple level. And I think that is like some super effective teaching.
Yeah, it's one of the things that and it's a struggle too to coach coaches in that environment because like you recognize they're doing it, and it's like, okay, you're trying to do you're you know, like what they say is like assume positive intent. Like they're trying to do the right thing by teach this information, and then trying to connect the dots with them is just like the distinction I find is right almost in that the very beginning of that teaching portion when we give that lectures is the distinction between what's for me and what's for them. Of all this information, what of it is for me, meaning like the internal versus the external portion. And it's just like if you were to like visualize it, like the internal portion is like Mount Everest, but externally it's like one pebble comes out and like that's all that you give them. And it's like getting them to like wrap their brain around that is like the hardest part. Is like, we're not going to climb Mount Everest right now. We're going to just work with this little tiny rock and that's it. And they're like, that's it. I'm like, that's it.
And not to brag about our coaches development group firm, but yesterday, Nick and a couple other people are really showing that, you know, it's whether it's layering or using the progression, that's what it's all about. You know, we see people that are like, all right, guys, we're going to squat. I need your weight in your heels. I need you to drive those knees out below parallel, chest up. And it's like, or, hey guys, we're going to squat. Let's just start with your feet shoulder width apart and wiggle your toes. Right. And I'm seeing it's one of, like Steve's saying, it's one of the easiest places to make improvements that really transcend your coaching. Do you think there's ever a time and a place to go a little deeper on this stuff?
I mean, that's a really good question. I get that question a lot on seminars of like, well, what if you've got someone that wants to know more? And it's like, yeah, I mean, if there's someone that wants to know more, then have that conversation. That could be a conversation offline after class. Or if you're a rock star coach, you might sprinkle some of that into your class. But ultimately, you're always doing it within the context of like, is my interaction with this one person at the expense of the other people in the room? You know, like if you're giving that information and you're losing other people's engagement or they're not getting what they need from you, then I think you probably made a mistake.
Fair. So let's you want to kind of go criteria by criteria here, Fern?
Yeah, I mean, it makes the most sense. So I mean, so like the teaching obviously, and then the seeing piece. What's your do you have a preference in the seeing drill, Steve? Like how you run that?
It's funny. I've been experimenting with some stuff in the teaching and seeing. So there's teaching and seeing, and then there's seeing and correcting, right? So we have multiple opportunities to play around with seeing. One of the experiments I've been playing around with, which I found very beneficial, and I have passed it up the food chain. I'm not just out here flying by the seat of my pants. Is the in the teaching and seeing drill, right? What I've played around with is actually having one participant who is just responsible for teaching, meaning they are solely focusing on knowing the points of performance, communicating them effectively, layering them in. And then I'll have another participant actually pulled out who isn't doing any teaching, who is just going to watch the athletes move. And all they're doing is looking for the points of performance that the other coach is delivering. And then the minimum requirement at the end of the drill is that they have a piece of paper with every single participant's name. And then like, this is the point of performance that they're performing well. This is the point of performance that they need improvement on as a minimum. So I'm trying to create there a less stressful opportunity to observe, but also an opportunity that it doesn't matter that person over there looks like they're a good mover. By the end of this drill, you need to tell me something they need to do better.
I like that. I think that's cool. That's an interesting way to run that drill. Yeah, you broke down the drill how we would normally, but you broke it into 2 people instead of just simply 2 parts.
Because ultimately teaching is a difficult skill set. Seeing is a difficult skill set. And then when you know, this is the first practical drill of the weekend. So we know that people come in, they're nervous, they're uptight, they're worried about not being good enough, et cetera, et cetera. So my whole goal is I want to give you something simple, direct, where there's a very clear criteria for how you can be successful, right? I'm not trying to have you live in the gray areas here. I'm like, hey, you want to be successful at this seeing drill? Minimum is you've got to watch every single person and you need to give me a point of performance that is good and one that they need to work on, right? And I think most people can latch onto that and be like, okay, I got it, I'm in. And then when they have that initial positive experience in the first drill, that momentum takes them positively into the next drills. But if they don't have that, that can then create like a barrier we then have to work through of them establishing more confidence or, you know, trying to right the ship a little bit. And ultimately, I think both those skills are tricky, and I think they deserve individual attention rather than trying to just overload that participant straight out of the gate with teaching and seeing together.
If I had my druthers about it, I would have at least one more breakout in the level 2. We would remove a lecture and we would do one more breakout session, one more practical session for that exact reason.
Yeah.
Is that all of that stuff is so difficult. And you can, I mean, you guys have both seen it. I've seen people make tremendous progress over just 2 days.
Oh,
but I'm like, man, how much more ground could we cover if we could do a little bit more isolation here and just give you like 1 or 2 more, not even skills, but 1 or 2 more roadmaps to create your own process so that you feel comfortable to get into a flow when you step onto the floor. I think would be huge.
Well, for most people at their level 2, it's truly their first feedback they've ever gotten as a coach. So just that's going to be tremendous.
Yeah, and then having Steve stand over their shoulder, freak him out, it doesn't help either. You know,
where do you think most trainers go wrong in regards to seeing? You know, is it that they just look all over the place? Is it they don't know what they're looking for?
I know how to look, and I know where to look.
People are generally people are trying to look for too much at once. There's the mindset of like, hey, I call this rep, I've got to get my eyes on every single person, and they end up looking for everything and they see nothing. And you know, we do want to interact with every person, but it doesn't have to be in that rep, right? It's better to have like, hey, I call this rep and I maybe get to 1 or 2 people statically. I get one person dynamically, and then I'm systematically making sure I apply the same template to all the other people in the room, so that everybody gets eyes on at some point during the session. And I think just, you know, much like teaching, if we focused on doing less better and we focus on seeing a little bit less better, we're going to be more effective at seeing the stuff, especially the tricky stuff. You know, hip extension, early pull, early press. All that kind of stuff is very difficult to see, you know, and it's, you know, only myself and Adrian Bosman can walk in a room and smell a lack of hip extension. You know, I think we talked about that.
I've heard that.
Well, it's not for lack of trying on Jay. I've seen him sniff mini hips at his seminars. I think in the teaching, I think there's a component of time in that instructional environment that is both beneficial and negative. So what I have found in the teaching is if I squeeze people on time, they actually become more effective teachers because they only blurt out the minimum. However, if I squeeze them on time, they freak out when it comes to seeing and they can't get anything done. And I think it's like just kind of exposing people to like just this component of time is something that you have to navigate, which is like, if I just give you less time and I say, you can only do this, sometimes it's better. But then in seeing now that's that time component, if I was to cap it, now requires a level of discipline to say, oh, I'm not going to get everything, but I am going to get a couple of things. And I think that's the seeing part is the what I find and where I made good progress there was just like, oh, I don't have to get everything now. I just need to get only what I'm looking for.
Yeah, and if you're systematic, you then have confidence that you are eventually going to cover everything. But
Right.
if you don't have a system, then you're constantly second guessing yourself of like, oh man, I've got to look for this, I've got to look for this. But if you actually come in with a solid plan for how to assess a movement, then eventually you're going to make sure you've seen everything.
Cool. What about correcting? Actually, I want to go back to something. I learned this from you, Steve, and I still use this to this day. I was I forget where I think we might have been working a level 2 here in Virginia Beach, and it was like a very small level 2. So you and I were kind of like ping-ponging the group. And I heard you say something. It was essentially like soft talk with somebody's like, their elbows, they're a little down. They're like, why didn't you do something? They're like, well, they're just a little bit down. And you said, and I think I mentioned here on the podcast, you're like, there's no such thing. Like they're down or they're up. But the second that I introduce some sort of qualification of poor movement, it puts me in this camp of maybe, at which point I will probably do nothing. And I still try to express to people that, like, really hot out of the gates at the level 2. And I'm like, there's no little sort of, kind of, or maybe. There's just good positions and not good positions. And you'll have to do something if you look at it in this kind of binary fashion. And I find that helps a lot of people. So I want to thank you for that. So there's a lot of people that have gotten that, but it was from Steve Haydock.
We hammer that
And
in the coach development group specifically.
Because I think that quantitative phrase, people use it as an excuse to leave stuff alone. Oh, their chest is coming a little bit forwards, so it's not a big deal. And recently I've got to the point where when someone says that, my initial response is, oh, so it's only a little bit wrong. And then they're like, oh,
damn it.
Yeah. And then it's like, okay, now it is black and white,
Right.
Their elbows look, so it's a little bit wrong. So it's wrong. And then like, okay, copy that. Now I'm going to go back and actually fix that thing that I was going to walk away from.
Yeah. Correcting. How do you have anything unique you do in the correcting drill? I've seen this done a million different ways. I always like to pick people's brains on how they run the correcting drill as far as like the seeing portion, or the seeing and correcting piece.
I mean, I've seen it done a ton of different ways. One of the ways I don't like is where you kind of box people into certain cueing styles.
Right.
I think that's an artificial construct that isn't really needed. I think what a good level 2 seminar trainer will do is when they're working with a participant, if they see that they are in one mode, they'll be able to redirect that without being able to say, hey, you're only allowed to do this style. Because realistically, that's not the case when we're actually on the training floor. We do want you to be evolved across all the cueing styles, but the majority of us are predominantly going to use verbal cues. So, you know what? I think we should spend our time developing those really good verbal cues, because it's the tool we use the most, most of the time. So, but we do also need to have exposure to those other cueing styles, and also be good at them. So, I like to just let the participant go with that. The big thing that I hammer in correcting is a system again. Like, I think a lot of people are like, oh, well, I give a cue, and no, it's very systematic for me. We identify, we triage, we give a cue, whatever that may be, we reassess. And then the big piece that so many people miss is the opportunity to then provide feedback, and closing out that feedback loop with the athlete is so important. And again, I often have people feel what it's like if you don't get feedback as an athlete. So what I'm saying is, if I'm working with a coach, I'm like, hey, here's what happened. You gave a cue and then you just left that athlete. And I'm like, imagine this is me with you, and I'm like, hey, push your knees out. I look at you, and then I just turn and walk away in the opposite direction. What impression does that leave you with? And immediately it's so obvious. They're like, well, I have no idea if it was right or wrong. And I'm like, exactly. And that's exactly the experience your athlete is having if you don't close out the feedback loop with at least, okay, that was better, or like, hey, that didn't work, so we need to come back and try again. So I think, the people who are really good at this stuff, who make it look easy, are actually just very good at using systems when it comes to running a class, seeing and correcting, all that kind of stuff. It's just training yourself not to miss a step. And if you do miss a step, you got to catch yourself and go back.
Yeah, we're on cross circle cueing in our course, and that's all it is, right? It's just a system. I stand here, I look around, I watch one, I move on, right? And it's like, if you can the hard part, I think, for newer coaches is committing to that system. It's like, oh, I saw something over there. I got to go there. It's like, well, A, give a verbal cue, or B, wait till you're there, but stick to this system. And things start like, I one phrase I use a lot is, I don't see better than you. I know where to look better than you. And part of that is I know where to look better, or I can look better than you because I have my system in place. I think that's a really good point there. Do you?
It's like when you start working out. It's like it's really difficult. It's tough, and the easier, like seeing and correcting, I think is one of the hardest skills for coaches to develop and be good at, especially when you're talking about having, like, per rep, having multiple interactions with different athletes within one rep, where those athletes still receive the full cycle of feedback. Like, to be able to do that and do that rep on rep on rep is super challenging. It takes a lot of brain space. It's very, very difficult. And in the beginning, you just have to understand, okay, well, what can I manage in the beginning? What does that look like? It probably looks like one static fault identification with a static cue with a piece of feedback. That's where it begins. And then ultimately it might turn into two of them. And then eventually it's static, dynamic, static, all with feedback, and then potentially even more. But you don't go from 0 to that in one day, because your brain can't handle it. Like, you're just on overload. And at that point, I agree, there are people that are like, oh, this is difficult. Or it's, the other response, which lights my fire, is they're like, this is dumb. No, it's not dumb. You're just not good at it. So you're calling it dumb. Really, you just need to be better at this system. So you got to practice.
So I've done drills like that, Steve, where there's actually no coaching or correcting. It's just walking them through the process, meaning like, hey, you're gonna call a rep and you're gonna look over there. I don't even give a shit what you look at. You're just gonna look in that direction, and then you're gonna come back here, look at that, and then you're gonna call another rep, and you're gonna repeat the process. And the only drill here is create your system with no action items attached to it. It's just like, just do the routine, and then we'll stack other skills on top of it. And without fail, people they get like 2 athletes into the drill and they're like off target. And I'm like, no, right back over here. Just stay on task. I promise we'll stack these skills on top of each other. 100%. And then once they get it, all of a sudden they're just like, I can see so much. And I'm like, yeah, you're just sticking to the plan.
Yeah. I mean, even if you can teach a coach to scan the room,
right?
Like, all I want you to do is scan your eyes around the room. As soon as you can teach the coach to do that, you'd be amazed at how many athletes begin to correct just because they know that coach's eyes are moving around the room, right? And that's just part of the system. Hey, I scan, I look at the one, right? So it's just learning those habits and then being consistent with the habits. And eventually it becomes autopilot, right? You just get really good at it.
What you just said can't be understated, because I think we were watching Nick yesterday, and there was we were watching someone prior to him, and she had a good pattern, but her back, it was always very clear who she was watching, right? Nick had a very similar pattern, but he would step back, and everyone was like, fuck, I better get my elbows up because this guy's watching. And that's what you're saying. It's like creating that pattern and then making that class know, I'm looking at everyone every time real quick. They're like, okay, there's no being lazy today. If you're in a position in the class where your back is to someone, which happens, but just know they may be checked out because they're like, he's not watching me right now. 100%. You guys experience this at the level 2, though? You're like, all right, you watch the coach and I'm going to watch one person. I got this. I got it. Then they call a rep and they're like,
100%.
They're like, can't, it's like, what happened? Like, we were on the same page. You're going to watch one person. Then they're like, and I'm like,
it seems to be either one extreme or the other. Either someone is trying to look everywhere, or the person is only capable of looking in one place. And it's finding the middle ground. And one of the favorite things I do, honestly, it's not for my own entertainment, it is for the learning of the participants, is that it's a little bit for your entertainment. It's a little bit. But if I have a coach who's very in that one-on-one, like all they can do is focus on the athlete right in front of them. And often that is accompanied by the fact that they want to position themselves right next to the athlete. Yeah. They can't do the interaction from a distance. So not only are they watching one person, but they're right there in front of that person. I'll just walk around and be like, hey, do it to another athlete. Do a completely different movement.
Yeah.
And they'll call a rep, and then you've got someone, it's meant to be like push jerks, and someone over here is doing a front squat, and the coach won't even see it for like 8 reps. And that tells you all you need to know about your ability to monitor your room if you've got an athlete over here doing something completely different.
And
you know,
I will throw this out there because we've seen in our group. If you're calling a rep and wondering why the rest of the group is not doing it, like they've put their PVC or barbell down, it's that. Because you're so attentive to that one person, they either realize you're not watching them, so they're being lazy, or they think you're not watching them. They're like, oh, he's working with Steve over there. So if you notice that happening in your class or your group, that's an indication that, okay, maybe your position matters. Maybe you need to step back a little bit. By the way, Cody, will you drop, if you can, the episodes of Nicole Christensen and Lisa Ray into the comments? Trish mentioned them for somebody.
And then that actually, Jay, leads into the kind of the group management piece. So Steve, obviously we can't dive super deep into that in the level 2, a little bit on day 2, but even that is limited. So with regard to group management, it's in the name, obviously, like, but what's the big takeaway, or what are some nuggets that people could use in order to better hone that skill of group management?
I think there are 2 giant takeaways for group management. One is the value of actually having a plan beyond your plan for teaching, right? That is essential, which is why we have that lesson planning component. And then the other thing, which I think is such a simple thing, but is often neglected, is at the heart of our group management is asking ourselves the question, did we interact with every athlete? Right. And if we didn't interact with every athlete, we've got a problem with our group management. And that plays out in some super interesting ways on the level 2. Like one of my favorites is, you have the participant running the group, and they'll probably get to something that's a little bit sticky in terms of correction. And then they'll come out with this to the rest of the group. Hey, everyone else, relax, put your PVC pipes down. I'm working just with this person right now. Right. And for me, like, I'm like, hey, that doesn't fly. Like, is that person paying you more for this session than this person is? Because it just turns to personal training. And I think a lot of people don't understand that, of like, our job is to interact with everyone in the room. This is a group coaching experience. There's a skill to managing the group while still having meaningful interactions with an individual person. That's a skill. And, one of the ways we do that is by making our coaching to the individual available to the rest of the group, right? It's not like I'll have them holding a position while I'm making this fix, and this fix is going to be loud enough for other people to hear, so they get the benefit of hearing that information. So it's like, oh yeah, then, I think I need to do a bit more of that, with my elbows in this position, and ultimately, I think if you've got a rock solid plan, and you can like put your hand on your heart at the end of the session and be like, hey, I got to everybody at least once, which I think is a bare minimum. Like it should be a lot more than that. You need multiple touch points per session if you want to be doing a good coaching job, and also in terms of the business in connecting with people at a level beyond just their movement, right? Knowing people's names, asking them the questions, building the community, all that kind of stuff. So I think it's like, hey, be honest. Did I miss someone today? When I coach jiu-jitsu, I do exactly the same thing of like, hey, did everybody get something from me today? Or was I on one part of the mat more than I was on another part of the mat? Why was that happening? Do I now need to redress that balance somehow? So, they're the big pieces for me for group management.
I think what you just said there probably might have escaped some people, but that interaction inside of the 60 minutes of like getting those seemingly benign interactions is like one of the most important components of running an affiliate.
100%.
Like one of the most important things you could do is like getting those interactions that some of them, which might not even be fitness related. It might have shit to do with the workout that day.
Checking in. Yeah. It's, we talk about that in this lecture, but group management is not just like, hey, is everyone moving when you tell them to? Is everybody lined up? But it's like your ability to check in. And you can look at Nick's question here. I'll bring it up, Cody. I'd start it. But, he asks, is there a limited size for a circle? And I think he means more so like specifically a circle. And the answer is probably yes, somewhere. But more important for your question, Nick, it's what Steve just said. It's like, is this class too big? It's too big if I didn't check in with everyone. But then you'd have to check, like, okay.
So for the listeners, so real quick, for the listeners, the question is serious question. Is there a limit to size for doing teaching, seeing, correcting in a circle? Is there a point where the circle is too big and lines would be more effective? Steve, I'll let you answer that.
So I get that question a ton on seminars, and my answer is always the same. Is like, realistically, whether you use a circle or whether you use lines is probably going to be dictated by the nature of your training space, what you have. But if you are using a circle or you are using lines, you need to know why you're doing that. And if you don't know why you're doing it, and you don't know the pros and cons of that, but this is just how we've always done it, then I think you're in a pitfall right there. So a great example of that is, like, I'll often ask people, well, what's the benefit of the circle? Well, the benefit of the circle is I can be outside the circle and I can see everyone. Everyone's in my peripheral vision. They have the ability to see each other across the group. So there's this great visual transfer of like, oh, this person's working hard, I need to work a little bit harder, right? I'm not looking at the back of someone's head because we're all lined up. Now, contrary to that, what's the value of having people in lines? Well, if they're all lined up and I'm in the front of that group, everyone has a great line of sight on me. So if I'm presenting information, it might be a more optimal way to present information. But as soon as I've got like 3 or 4 lines stacked back to back, I know at some point in this class, I've got to get to that back line where I can look down the profile of that line to be able to see things like hip extension or bar path. I've now lost my ability to make eye contact with any of those other lines who are in front of me. So again, a lot of this is dictated by space, but it's like, okay, let's be creative with this. If we do have to use lines, maybe when I'm presenting at the front, everyone's looking at me, but when we start moving, those lines actually flip direction and we have the lines facing each other in some way.
We literally just posted a piece of the content on Instagram, like me walking through a group through exactly this scenario.
Yeah.
I mean, if you have space for 2 lines, you have space for basically an oval, right?
Yeah.
Where it's like, well, this
It's a circle.
Yeah, it's a squircle technically, but yes.
Yeah, and I think that the danger is the lines gives the coach this feeling of like, oh man, everything's super organized here. Like they're in lines, we're regimented, we're facing the front. But ultimately, that setup can really ruin your ability to see and correct and then manage the group if you are someone that is actually moving around your group. Mm-hmm. Now, if you're not that person, if you're the person who's rooted at the front of the room, because that's how you coach, I'm going to tell you, your seeing and correcting sucks, but people are probably looking at you. So it's like, know the why.
They're just watching you suck at a much higher.
Yeah.
It's easier for them to see you suck. Yeah.
Vern and I, this is not an absolute, but we're not fans of capping classes. And when I say that, we're not fans of capping classes with an arbitrary number that's not been factored into the success of your business and a few other factors. And I think a lot of the times coaches do it or owners do it. It's immediately like, well, I want the safety or, class experience. My coaches can't handle more than X. And would you say that a lot of that can be helped at least with better group management?
100%. Better group management, better coaching experience. Hey, here's the thing. Like, if you never allow someone to be exposed to the challenge of a bigger class, how are they going to get good at it? Right. It's like, and what we have to do is, as affiliate leaders, is we have to be looking at who we've got on the coaching floor, look at the numbers of people that are coming in. And if it is that this person hasn't had that experience before, we scaffold that experience. Like, we make sure we set them up for success so they can learn, there's a valuable skill set to be learned from that. And here's the thing, like, you guys know you've learned a ton from me. I mean, that's no secret.
Most of the things that I know in CrossFit, I've learned from Steve Haydock.
No, I was going to say most of the things I've learned.
You learned in life. You probably.
And by the way, Trish, that was private.
Dude, the comment section is a complete shit show.
Yeah,
I think you guys are professional, but you're not. Anyway, back to my point. But I actually saw your post the other day about capping class sizes, and like in my jiu-jitsu classes, I have been generally running a 16-person cap because of that.
Yeah, but that's.
And I was like, nah. I was like, yeah, but here's the thing, Ackman. Let me finish. I was like, that Ackman's onto something, because what I'm doing is I'm stifling my own creativity was solving this problem.
Shark bait, right? Rotate out. There's lots of options. I mean, and look, that's something we tell people. Like, if you have a 600 square foot place for your class, we probably need to think about it. But it's probably not as small as you think. That's what she said. It's, the number is probably higher than you think it is, first of all. And like you said, challenge yourself once in a while, right? Like, so are you going to increase the size?
So generally I've capped classes at 16, and then last week I have put it to 24. And there's been huge value.
You just like swung for the fences.
I like a challenge. So basically, it got my brain going. I was like, hey, you know what? Instead of doing people training in pairs, I'm going to have people training in threes. And whoever is the observer is actually practicing watching the movement and like giving feedback. Like
I would imagine there's tremendous value in that.
I mean, whenever I'm first of all, you have to understand this, for like, depending on the class, like you go to jiu-jitsu, sometimes the instructor's like, we're doing a move, they leave you for like 15 minutes. So it's like half the people are checked out anyway. But now you have 3 people and you're like, and then you go both directions.
Listen, I'm pretty much a professor in jiu-jitsu. I've watched at least 12 sessions of my daughter just lay on the ground and pick her nose.
I don't want to brush past this, that Steve is basically learning from my Instagram. I didn't want to. That kind of went really fast. Let's go back to that.
I felt like I had to say that. I had to say that because I wouldn't be a true professional if I didn't give credit where credit was due. And as I've been so influential in your both of your development, I feel like I had to just pay some credit back in your direction.
Let's throw this one up there. Right? That's nice one of my favorite Coach Glassman quotes. People arguing about that. It's like you got 2 level 4s, a flow master level 3, all telling you like, hey, time and a place to cap. You're just probably not there right now. So let's dig in. Huge fan of presence and attitude. If I was going to say, it's like your coaching's 90% presence and attitude, 10% kind of mixed across the other 5, 2% each. And I know you said they're all equal, but if someone said, okay, I want to improve at presence and attitude tomorrow, what's one thing I can do to be better tomorrow?
Use people's names.
Period. There you go. That was the one. I mean, that's valuable. That's it. Yeah.
Okay, moving on.
Not rocket science.
I have a super easy system for this. Like, honestly, you should use people's names, and you shouldn't mess it up. Right? You should know people's names. If someone has been coming to your affiliate for 12 months and they walk through the door and you're like, hey, friend, that's a miss, right? You've got a problem right there. So, in my gym, we have where our entry is, we have a little bell on the door, and we have a minimum that when someone walks through the door, they get greeted by name. There's a minimum number of coaching interactions we're aiming for per session. And when they leave, even if they're walking out, we will say goodbye with their name when they leave as well.
What's the number of interactions?
We shoot for 3 per session. Right number.
So they get, so it's really 5 interactions because you got your hello and goodbye and your 3 in the middle, right?
That's right.
I think I saw a great meme the other day. It was like, my husband asked the neighbor his name, and I didn't know you could do that, right? And it's like, as coaches, we forget. Like, it's okay to be like, hey, I forgot. Like, what's worse than not doing that is, like Steve just said, 9 months later, still not knowing their name.
Well, I think it actually I think what's missed in that whole interaction is like, it actually shows that you give a shit if you ask. You're like, yo, I'm sorry. I forgot. I apologize. I want to call you Bob. And I know that's not your name. What's your name? Right. And they're like, it's Jeff.
I'll be like, oh, Kevin, right? And he's like, it's Adam. I'm like, are you sure? I'm pretty sure, and then they'll be like, then it's like a joke now. And I got their name. Yeah. Right. So, okay. I like that. So everybody's got something tangible for
got to go with name. Got to go with name as first. The second thing is you've got to be prepared to look someone in the eye. Like there's a confidence as a coach that you need to be able to look someone in the eye, use their name. I think that's super important. And then the other thing, which I think is often overlooked, and I think you guys will be on board with this, is like we spend our lives in this environment where there's black rubber matting, there's a huge steel cage effectively, and then rings hanging from the ceiling. And for us, we're like, yeah, this is our home. But then we lose perspective of someone that's never been in that environment before, and they walk through the door and they step on that training floor for the first time, and they look around and they're like, good like, what the hell is going to happen to me in this place? You know, like, am I going to be upside down on that, you know, in those rings? Like, and I think the easiest way you deal with all of that is you just put a damn smile on your face. Like, I don't care how bad your day is. I don't care that you're coaching the 5 a.m. class or someone spilled your coffee. Like, those people, you need a personal connection with a name. You need to look them in the eye and you need to put a smile on your face. And if you can't do that, you've got no right being in the gym.
Names, eye contact, smile.
Yeah.
Recipe
That's a lot. That's a lot. I don't know if I can bite off on all of
You
that.
Three
will
things.
struggle with the smile at first, Fern, but I think you could do the name thing.
You want me to do what?
Exactly. Let's go on to the final criteria, which is demonstration. You know, typically we think about demonstration moving. News flash, spoiler alert, everyone can move better. So if you're a coach and you're not constantly filming yourself, working on those movements, you should be doing it. In addition to that, it's, you know, how do you demonstrate? Do you live this lifestyle? What's your nutrition like? Are you doing the same programming? But what are some ways that you've noticed over the years trainers act unprofessionally, not realizing it, and it's diminishing, you know, their demonstration as a professional?
So I think that's a really good point, and I know you've had a couple of posts on this recently where you've been referring to professionalism. Like, let's put this into a bigger picture mindset kind of stuff. Like, one of the things on the level 2 I talk to people about a lot is, like, what's your goal with this? Where do you want to go with this career? What are you looking for? Because if you think about all the most famous or greatest coaches within not only our community but outside of this community, they all began somewhere. But there was something that they had that allowed them to differentiate themselves from the crowd. And I think that differentiation is a commitment to professionalism. It's like, I don't see myself as being this, like, part of a crowd. I want to distinguish myself as something above and beyond that. And, you know, I think when you have that mindset of, like, I want to be better than average, you know, it opens so many doors, not only in terms of opportunities, but also in terms of, you know, financial reward. And it like, a lot of people joke, oh, well, you don't get into coaching fitness or coaching CrossFit to become a millionaire. And I'm like, well, why not? Like, we are actually selling something that is the most valuable commodity that people need more and more than ever in the world right now. And we actually have the answer to that problem. So why are we seeing ourselves as like a $15 an hour group coach? Like, we're worth more than that. We can actually literally change the quality of people's lives. And if you want to do that and you want to really push yourself to that level, how you see yourself as a professional, I think, is super important. So that means, you know, show up on time. And when I say on time, I mean 15 minutes early. So you can be prepared to welcome people and you've got your whiteboard prepped and, you know, you've done your logistical checks. And, you know, sometimes you even have to check the restrooms and make sure there's toilet paper in there, right? Because that's part of our service that we're providing. And then also just present yourself as a professional person, which means you should look the part. Like, I know you've been referencing, like, oh, you've just finished a 20-minute Metcon and you don't have your shirt on and you walk on the floor to start coaching. Well, that to me isn't professional. Like, you know, you should be representing your affiliate, looking professional, acting professional. And, you know, when you do that, you'd be amazed at where that can take you, like how people perceive you and see you and like how they'll buy into that. I think let me just say this. I think one of the biggest tragedies of the CrossFit coach is when you perceive yourself as having far less value than you actually have. And when you can shift that mindset, not only will your affiliate benefit, your athletes will benefit, but you will benefit. Because we want people doing this job, but we also want you not to be doing this as your third job. Like, we want professional coaches that can actually make a good living from this and have the financial reward along with the, you know, the spiritual and personal reward of actually making people's lives better.
Well, one thing he said there, and this is a sticky point for me because people were arguing me about it, especially like the stop showing up smelly with knee sleeves and drinking your protein. Like, people are fighting with me. And I think something you just said summarizes it. Like, if you want this to be financially rewarding, right? Like, I'm going to throw this out there. Like, you're not going to find 3 other human beings on this planet that have been better rewarded financially with CrossFit coaching than the 3 of us. You know, there's others as well, but like the 3 of us have done it. We've made a living coaching CrossFit for over 10 years now, each of us. So when you argue with me about these points, like I try not to get involved, but it's like, how much money are you making? Like, are you complaining about your $15 an hour gig or that you can't do this full time? Like, are you willing to stop and realize like, oh, I'm responsible for this as well? And maybe if I acted like a professional, I would be treated like a professional. Because yeah, back in the day, I'd show up from one class or my own workout, sweaty, whatever. And I realized like, that's no way to be. These people are your paying members. They're coming here for the best hour of their day to be treated properly. And you showing up, you know, with the same sweaty shirt you just worked out in. I'm not suggesting you don't work out. I'm just suggesting, hey, take 10 minutes after your workout, wipe yourself off, throw on a clean t-shirt, take your gross knee sleeves off, and be ready to coach. We do it every weekend. Every single weekend. Someone's like, well, you guys on seminar staff work out at lunch. Yeah. And Steven and Fern are flow masters. And every single time we work out, they're like, what are we doing? Look professional when we come back, which means be done 10 minutes early. It's the same thing. It's the same thing. So,
100%.
And I think
there's,
go ahead.
I think there's a super interesting point here. Is like, we have to look at, you know, and I think this is something that needs to be tackled at the top of the affiliate. Is, are we actually?
That's where I was going with this.
Are we having a coaching team? Are we having a coaching team here who is actually just coaching this class in exchange for a free membership? Right. Because if that's their goal, like, hey, I'm going to run these 3 classes in exchange for my membership. What's their motivation right there? Like, do they want to be a professional? Do they want to be the world's best coach? And if that's what's seen as acceptable at the top of the affiliate leadership, that's a bigger problem.
Well, I've had this conversation with multiple people in the, you know, pretty higher up in the ecosystem. And the question is like, how do we promote and create professional coaches? Right. We have the, you know, the content that comes out, the professional coach, and that starts at the affiliate. Because if we cannot professionalize the affiliate and we cannot have affiliate owners that view themselves as professional box owners and they treat how they live their lives, how they interact with their staff, how they interact with their clients, there is no place for a professional coach. It will not be a thing because they will have nowhere to go and coach. So it starts with the affiliate owners, meaning like act like a professional. What if you were like the best box owner in the world? If you could imagine what that person would look like, what would they be doing every day? And if you're like, I don't know what the hell to do every day when I go to the box, I'm like, imagine that person, or imagine like the most awesome version of your gym 10 years from now. I'm like, do that. Show up on time. The number of people that I talk to, they're like, they're not at the gym. And I'm like, why aren't you at the gym? They're like, well, I don't have any classes. And I'm like, it doesn't matter. You own a gym. Go the fuck to work. Like 100%. There's some shit at your gym that needs to be taken care of. Yeah. Go do it and be a professional. Like a professional's work. They're always, like you've already said it, Steve, like constantly looking to improve things. Like me all the time. I'm like, there's an infinite list of things here at CrossFit Rife that need to be fixed. And that list will probably stay infinite, for the record. But that's how professional.
I think it's interesting because, you know, in 20 years time, I'm sure there's going to be a college course you could take to be like, let's study the evolution of CrossFit and, you know, business practices and how it, you know, how it expanded and all that kind of stuff. And ultimately, I think it's really interesting because this was a grassroots fitness movement, meaning that a lot of businesses began out of a group of friends who were getting together to work out. Right. And then you mix that kind of seed, you mix that beginning with a very low barrier to entry in terms of the affiliate fee. And suddenly you've got people who are starting businesses and actually what they put on the line, maybe $10,000. If you flip the script on that and you're like, hey, you know what, to open a CrossFit affiliate, you need $500,000. Guess what? You're going to get very professional people because suddenly there's a lot more on the line. And here's the thing is, you know, I understand why CrossFit grew how it grew, but ultimately, if you can't look at your business and be like, hey, my business is going to be better for everyone if I run it like a business, I've just got to get my butt in gear and actually do it. and it's like, oh, well, people like it, it's informal. No, people don't like change. Like, no one enjoys change, but ultimately change has to happen if we're going to do a better job. And if you want to have a successful affiliate, there are more and more affiliates that are opening now that are going down that route of like, we're going to open as a professional business.
Right.
Natasha, my wife, was an affiliate in Texas a couple of weeks ago, and I was at a different affiliate, and she was sending me pictures, and it was like, this place was legit. Like, it had turf, sauna, hot tub, cold plunge, legit coffee bar. The retail was brilliant. Like, the restrooms were better than my house. And I'm like, okay, this is, is she sending me a message? Do I need to do something about my restrooms? I wasn't sure what was going on. But
we're like, why are you in the men's room, Natasha?
Yeah. What are you doing there? Get out of there right now. But equally, it's like, you look at that affiliate, and I'm like, if I was training that affiliate, I'm prepared to pay, X number of dollars,
right,
which might be 200, 250, 300, whatever it is, right? Which is very different to this affiliate that's, everything's rusty. There's crap everywhere. There's no like booking system, and it's like $40 a month, or like, and that is the craziness of this business model, in a sense that you can apply it however you want. But I don't understand why people would be happy to apply just a shitty application apart from they just want it easy.
Well, I think it goes back to where we started, and we kind of come full circle on this, is like, box owners and coaches alike need to be pursuing the next level of wherever you're at. Like, if you're at the bottom rung, well, then what do? I'm like, you just go to the next rung, and then you get there and you figure out the next one. But it's constant improvement, not just for coaches, but for box owners as well. And a lot of that, I think a lot of that can be grasped from the level 2 because of the nature of the design of that course. You're like, what's the whole intent from the level 2? It's like, get feedback, implement feedback, rinse, repeat, and just do that over and over and over. And not shockingly, you'll get good.
I mean, here's the thing: you will get good if you actually implement the feedback. Right. And it's like, that is, such a hurdle for people to get over. Is like, not all feedback is going to be good, but there's value in that, as long as if you can see the wood for the trees, you can take that stuff and you can action that, and there's a benefit to you for that. And and it's another interesting thing that I say about on the level 2. Is that we have people that come on the level 2, and they get exposed to all these professional tools, right? So they get not only coaching development, but they get to like learn from the other people in the room. There's a lot of great discussion around people's experiences, and they learn a ton within 2 days, and ultimately they then go take a test and they get a certificate. And like, one of the things I'm very clear about in closing remarks, again, it's not an official part of closing remarks, but I'm like, okay, you've gone through this experience, you've seen all this stuff, you've learned this stuff, you're going to get a certificate. And the easiest thing for you to do is you take that certificate and you hang it on the wall, and you don't do anything else. So ultimately, in my mind, you go through the level 2, you get the certificate. What it really means is you have the potential to distinguish yourself as a level 2 if you choose to implement the learning that you've just went through. But if you don't do that, then guess what? Ultimately, you're just back where you were in the first place.
Right.
And that is such an important part of people's development at all levels of the affiliate. Is like, we need feedback, and we take that feedback and we use it to make my coaching better, make my restrooms better, make my front of house person better, whatever it is. And the result of that is, I think it creates a humility. Like, we want to be humble as human beings and as coaches, and we shouldn't think we've got it all worked out, because no one does. And then, we take that stuff and we just use it to do a better job. The methodology is great. Like, it's very difficult. We began with this. The methodology is uniquely excellent at providing results. The affiliate experience is like the thing there that is often like not living up to that same standard, whether that's in coaching or the restrooms or whatever. And I think if we can do a job to bring everything up, then we're going to be successful, and we should be, because this stuff works. So,
well, speaking of feedback, if you guys are watching this, like and subscribe, like the banner says. Please like, please subscribe, please tell a friend that Fern is going to start smiling next week.
I've given him that exact feedback. In fact, I think in the past.
I didn't implement it.
If you sift through the pornography in the chat,
that is the chat.
you will notice everyone saying we're learning from this show. We're learning from the coach's development. We appreciate all you guys are doing. That's what we're here for. That's why people like Steve Haydock is here, because he's passionate about it just like us. We genuinely appreciate you coming on. That was fantastic. Like we said, the list of people coming on for the level 2, it's I think you nailed. I think you're actually right, Fern. It's all flow masters. And let me tell you, as much as it pains me,
this is the way.
As much as it pains me to say it, the flow masters have not only been around for a very long time, but they're the cream of the crop. Like, there's less than maybe 200 people on seminar staff, and maybe 25% have earned that flow master credential. It's time and it's experience and it's knowledge. So you're going to want to tune in. By the way, if you do want to see Fern live in action, head to the Northeast Summit this weekend. Where are you going to be? Maryland, DC?
Yeah, we'll be at CrossFit Glen Burnie, right outside of it's like in kind of like Baltimore area. So if you're in the Northeast area and you're going to be there, I think it's gonna be packed. It's like well over 200 people registered. So I'm looking forward to seeing a bunch of box owners, a bunch of people there. It's gonna be a fantastic weekend.
And rumor on the street, Fern.
I like rumors.
I don't know if you're aware of this. I've heard it. I don't think you have. You were the best at the previous summit.
Best looking, I think, was the feedback.
That did not come up. It was best, just best, period. Looking may have been involved.
It's best dressed.
You'll be most likely to succeed. No, you will learn something. If you learn a lot from this show, I know not everybody can go. It's for the license on registration for the for your affiliate. But man, if you're thinking about hitting up one of the summits, you should go. I'll be in Atlanta in June. Fern will be at much of the rest of them over the year. And if you're in the greater Missouri area, is it Missouri? Is that right?
No.
Missouri is how you no. check out Steve CrossFit. Is it CrossFit Kokoro?
So my gym is called Kokoro Training Academy, and my affiliate.
You don't want to be associated with CrossFit. Is that why?
I just offer a lot more services.
What's the CrossFit name? What'd you say?
Counterpart CrossFit, because I run it with my counterpart.
Oh, I like that a lot. We didn't even get into the rocking chair. We didn't get into the rocking chair, Steve. We didn't get into we'll have Steve on for I think we need a little Steve Haydock after hours. We'll get we'll get some whiskey going. Done. And Steve, we are going to do some IRL episodes. That's what we refer to as our in real life episodes. You would be a fantastic one. I mean, your knowledge, your experience, your stories. We gotta hit a road trip. We'll get Fern on the mats. We'll get Natasha tapping Fern. We'd go viral. I think
100%.
We would definitely want her to have a little bit something more difficult to do than choke me out. I don't think it'd be that difficult.
But man, that was awesome. The chat was off the hook. You dropped some knowledge bombs. I appreciate you defending some of my posts, because I don't always do a good job defending them. I do a good job putting the idea out there. So hearing from someone like you that I have a ton of respect for, that's in agreement, dare I say, learning from my Instagram. Really means a lot. So we'll get a call-in show coming tomorrow. We got the progression, right, Cody? Who's on tomorrow? Any idea, Cody? Doesn't matter. Tune in tomorrow, Thursday, 3:30 Eastern. Fern, you got the hot seat on Mondays. Oh, by the way, this was on last week. I don't know if it was on this show or the progression. Carl Stedman. We got Carl Stedman next Tuesday.
Yep.
Good luck. Good luck with that.
That's an OG. You're good buddies with Carl?
You'll need a translator probably for that one.
That's what I was going to bring up. So this will end the show here. I have been told, Steve, that you speak proper English, and what we speak is not proper English, and definitely not what Denise Thomas speaks is not proper English.
I can't even comment on what Denise Thomas.
Steve kicks off the level ones. Let me paraphrase. Like, if you're not used to what you're hearing, this is how the English language is meant to sound. Is that right, Steve?
That's exactly right. It's pretty good. It's accurate. Yeah.
Yeah. I listen. I pay attention.
Normally, I didn't think you'd know that, because normally you're like doing biceps.
I'm checked out. By 9:05, I'm checked out. Yeah. But I listen to your opening remarks and then I check out.
Yeah, that's right.
So no, this was fantastic. Hopefully you guys learned. Again, like the video or the show. If we have Nick on, and please share this with your friends. We're clearly growing, which we genuinely appreciate. We love doing this, and great episode. Fern, anything to add before we wrap up?
No, always a pleasure, Mr. Haydock. Can't wait to catch up sooner rather than later, hopefully.
I appreciate it, guys. Thanks for having me on.
Take us out.